Looks like we are active. Let us launch our evolution hour for today, technically the 1st of December 2025 in our ongoing year of doom. And remember, trouble's in paradise. Okay, where is our stupid little once in a while this bloody thing knocks its window down and I can't the damned window. Come on, you little bastard. Ah! Damn. Well, yipes. What has happened to that idiotic submenu? There we go. Yikes. Pull it down to the thing and it drops the window down into a spot where my damn little mouse can't, or finger wipey thing on the laptop can't get to it. Very annoying. Oh well, I'm a clunky one. I'm not even somebody that can do this on a smartphone. I have to do it tippy type, touch type. Oh well, so I'm a troglodyte. Anyway, welcome to today's evolution hour, or this morning's evolution hour, or this evening's evolution hour, depending on what time zone you are in. As you well aware, we've been plowing along Titans, our creationist dinosaur book. And then every other week, we are also doing an analysis of the Discovery Institute's junk DNA monstrosity that Casey Luskin threw at Dan Stern-Cardinale. That would be the main thing. I've also kind of settled on the idea that once I finish with Sarfati and Tay, I'll be doing that double whammy reference bibliography for the 1974 Duane Gish Evolution, the Fossils Say No, and the 1995 Evolution, the Fossils Still Say No, to see how many sources were actually done up and how much he added in the 1995 version. It may boil down to practically nothing except some smattering for dinosaurs, but we would know one way or the other. Plus, it will act as a way of familiarizing the audience to some creationist material that's functionally extinct from modern day apologetics, because almost all of that old Henry Morris books, Duane Gish books, and all that are bygone era, print era. And very little of their material is available directly online. So, hello, Brian. So the average creationist is going to be riffing off of online material where there's just little snippets of Morris and Gish and that older brand of stuff. If they were doing articles for Acts and Facts or Creation Magazine or something like that, it shows up. But otherwise, their magnum opus are functionally invisible, except to old farts like me that would have bought the books directly, or maybe some anal retentive young person who decides to scavenge through a used bookstore and find them that way, or buy them at some exorbitant price on Amazon. So I think that'll be a fun little bit, because there certainly is no reference bibliography in them, and it's an interesting matter to kind of ferret through the dynamics of young Earth creationism back in the 70s and into the 1990s, as opposed to the stuff that we're dealing with constantly, people currently. So that aside, Sadi and Tay are continuing to prattle on about bird evolution, and as I was expecting, eventually they bring up Alan Fiducia. They just can't resist it. He is their only authority figure. It came up in a particularly wacky context, though, because they brought up an old 1986 paper by Jacques Gautier that's available at archive.org, so I'll be putting a link up to that little puppy, which stands in contrast to baraminologists trying to do their counterpart of cladistylisis. But Sarfati and Tay are trying to dismiss fiducia or cladistics, not by analyzing any of Gautier directly, let alone any cladistic study done since 1986, which means practically 40 years given the publication date of their book, but trying to use Alan Fiducia as the cudgel, because Fiducia never liked cladistic analysis. He was always critical of it. He didn't show any particular skill in being able to use it. So he's kind of an irrelevant outlier in this area. And I thought it was particularly amusing, although entirely predictable, that they would try to deal with him in the same way. Jonathan Wells invoked fiducia pretty much in the same thing. In fact, I think fiducia was literally the advisor on icons of evolution on cladistic analysis. So fiducia gets around. And he is, in my view, the Fred Hoyle of bird evolution, somebody who had a reputation and has skill set within a particular niche, but goes out on a limb. In this case, his absolute rejection of the dinosaur origin of birds and never offering an alternative. This game might have sounded okay back in the 1990s before we had such a glut of new fossils arrive. And the fact that the kind of vague, thecodont, non-Archosaurian dinosaur origin of birds that he hints at, there's been never any fossil indication, including from fiducia. They're basically trying to poke holes in the standard cladistic analyses. And it has, as you may suspect, gotten no traction whatsoever in the regular scientific community. So it's almost the case fiducia is taken more seriously by creationists than he is now by regular scientists. Within his niche of physical bird anatomy and things like that, and the distribution of existing birds, because that's his field, he can still be pretty useful and he can do stuff. But he's kind of slid into writing diatribe books complaining about the bird dinosaur model rather than doing technical papers, even the AUK, although he does pop up occasionally in there. Anyway, Sarfati and Tay then go on to try to downplay Archaeopteryx. And this one is, apropos Duane Gish, relates to the notion that I had about the no cousins rule, which is the classic creationist argument that if you can somehow show that an organism is not the direct ancestor in a lineage, that therefore it's unrelated, which means that if you can show that somebody is a cousin, that means you're not related to them. Nah, that doesn't follow. So in this case, Sarfati and Tay declare, quote, while Archaeopteryx is believed to be flight capable, it is no longer regarded as ancestral to the line that led to modern birds, unquote. And they referenced for this one paper, 2018 work by Voeten et al. In Nature. Perfectly fine little paper, and I'll be putting the link up to it. Problem was, speaking of skill sets, now the old fart can talk to himself in chat. Yes. I do try to get the chat screen up at least, but the idiot thing, the irritating thing about Word and the Microsoft material on this particular laptop is its insistence on reducing things and dropping things below the horizon when I didn't ask to do that. It's doing it automatically in the same way that like in Windows 8, where suddenly I'll be moving a file over to another screen and suddenly it decides it wants to fill the entire screen out with that. Or for that matter, Word, which all on its own decides to open files read-only when I never have that the case. So sometimes I'll be making the mistake of not checking the heading and finding out that I've been trying to do a bunch of editing on a thing that's read-only, which would mean I would have to copy it, save it as a different file, eliminate the original one and retitle that one to fit, it's a mess. So the vicissitudes of things. I can't complain too much about it because still all of these tools that we have for information storage and word processing and all that are miraculous and wonderful and astonishing and fantastic. I mean, we've got print shops literally connected to these little portable electronic devices. So let's not be too grumpy about it. We can work around it. But it is occasionally minor vexing. I only talk to myself when doing laundry. I talk to myself almost all the time. So that's how I riff off ideas for my novels and discuss scenarios for things and go over presentations I might want to be doing, rehearsing material for videos, etc., etc. Anyway, back to the Voeten paper from 2018. It was a charming and odd paper to cite on Archaeopteryx being on a siding because it wasn't about that. It was only on looking at one of the later specimens of Archaeopteryx that was permitting them to analyze the details of things to suggest that Archaeopteryx could apparently fly better than had been previously thought, and that it was doing with this with a flight stroke that's not like what's found in later birds that make use of that powerful sternum. So perfectly fine little paper, but it's not really relevant. If they wanted to contend that Archaeopteryx wasn't the immediate ancestor of birds, first of all, fine, go ahead and cite works on that. And second, so what? It's still no cousins rule. It's still in that block of things that are damn close, and it still is a perfectly fine transitional form. Indeed, the late Jonathan Wells, I got him on a spectacular admission when I was trying to probe what his opinion was about whether Archaeopteryx, if they didn't like Archaeopteryx as a transitional form, well, what would be the perfect transitional form for a bird? And when probed on it, and it was not easy to get in touch with Wells, he proved my point, because he couldn't imagine what an actual transition would look like that he would accept. Instead, he just jumped back to repeating that Archaeopteryx is not a good transitional form, without really saying, well, what would have to be different on it for it to be perfect? What would, if you had the perfect transition and Archaeopteryx sitting next to it, how could I tell them apart? And that kind of analogy and ways of thinking in that inability to ever perceive transitional forms is uniquely ubiquitous in anti-evolutionism. I've never found any anti-evolutionist of any stripe whatsoever, both living and historical, who's ever been able to specify that. They just don't think about it. Their brain turns off at that point. And that's because their brains, their philosophy does not permit transitionals to exist. So their apologetic action is only to figure out how they can get rid of the transitional, not how they would ever detail what they would ever accept. Because if they ever laid out what a perfectly fine transitional would look like, Archaeopteryx fits the bill quite nicely, even though it has some derived features which suggest that it's a cousin rather than on the direct line. For one thing, it's not in the ornithines. The ornithines are the one group of birds that made it through the mass extinction, whereas the enantiornithines and these various other lineages, which would include these early flyers like Archaeopteryx, sorting them out in detail would require a lot more fossils, and even better yet, their genetics. But we don't have any of that. We only have the genetics of extant birds. This is, of course, another installment of our Casey Luskin show. And spoiler alert, it doesn't coming up very good. Transitional forms are really misnomers. Living forms tell us large mutations are the exception. Yeah, that's the one thing that we do know. If you look, that's why the reptile mammal transition is a perfectly fine example of this, is that there is no spot in that transition where you would ever be able to say, wow, there's some macroevolutionary jump happening. And indeed, even higher level macroevolutionary sequences, like from whales on up to reptile mammal transition and origin of birds, the bit by bits that's going on year by year in a process that can take tens of millions, 50 million years, 100 million years, there's no abrupt things going on. It's all pile up of microevolutionary elements and lineage sidebars and all this kind of stuff. In fact, this could be thought about that with human evolution is starting to look in the same pattern that we see with birds and others, is that there's a whole bunch of humans prior to our becoming the only single species left over, which is entirely in keeping with how evolutionary processes are generating things. So anyway, this particular installment of the DI list involves, I culled several papers that are talking about a particular topic. They are not presented as a group. I had to notice that they're relating to the heterogeneous ribonucleoprotein particles, which are shortened as HNRNPA. And they're little RNA complexes that figure in the cell nucleus, so they're eukaryotic items, and they're involved in gene transcription and alternative splicing and modification of the resulting RNA strings, and all of that. And so the DI list is noting several of them: HNRNPA1 and A2, HNRNPC and HNRNPL. And those things were popping up in several papers that are sprinkled down through their list. They're not lumped together as a group. So presumably the people that put them on the list weren't seeing them as about a connective theme. They're just grabbing things because, oh gosh, they're talking about ALUs. They must be helping our case. Well, we'll look at these four and find out that no, they're not. So in chronological order, there's Pastor and Pagani 2011. That's from PLOS, so I'll be putting the full link up on that. And it identified, quote, both negative and positive, unquote, effects from the presence of ALU in all of this. That's setting our operation off right off the bat. The next paper is a couple of years later, and it's interesting that these are relatively older papers, which suggest they're trawling through little sidebars and stuff to gather up papers that are over a decade old. Pedagari et al. 2013, again, I'll be able to put the full text up on that, indicates that the HNRNP specifically is, quote, normally interferes with retrotransposition, unquote, which is a fancy way of indicating that the ALUs are retrotransposons, and they are like an invader. And this particular molecule is preventing that process, and therefore it's acting as a barrier to the development of ALUs. If ALUs are deliberately designed to be in there, why are you focusing on a system that's designed to keep them out if they're designed to be there? Needless to say, we wouldn't know what the DI's position is on any of these papers because they don't have any annotations or anything on them. They're just simply dumping it in a big pile. That notion that the ALUs are being treated by that particular system, the ribonucleoproteins, as an invader is clear enough from the paper, another paper from 2013, Zarnik et al. Again, I'll be putting up a listing for it, which definitely how unsupportive this was going to be for the Discovery Institute position, just from its title. Direct competition between HNRNP-C and U2AF65 protects the transcriptome from the exonization of ALU elements. So at that time, there were like 650,000 ALU elements known. It's now up to like 1.4 million. And these things were seen as, quote, posing a major threat to transcriptome integrity, unquote. So clearly, you've got, as we've been pointing out, a biological system that is trying to react to the pervasive threat of retrotransposons slipping into the system, and ALU being a major one because of its promiscuity and easy ability to repeat, because basically its tagline is copy me, copy me, copy me. But definitely systems that are designed to keep them from kicking in as functional systems. The last paper is from 2018. So again, not exactly super duper recent. And that one is discussing how these molecules might distinguish, quote, bona fide and decoy binding sites. In other words, a system develops that's really good at detecting ALUs is going to be just the thing you need to weed out real binding sites versus things that are coming up as mess from retrotransposon. ALUs are funding the church locked during the hurricane. Yeah. Oh, yeah. ALU actually stands for a long molecule. And nobody in the literature ever refers to it as such. They always just simply refer to it as ALU. And they this particular paper, this Howard et al. 2018 paper, is suspecting that ALU-derived elements could relate to species-specific variations in primates. So what you've got going is, remember, the ALUs are coming in fairly deeply back in primates and end up inherited in these various lineages. That a system that is trying to accommodate them, they can't necessarily easily get rid of them, can find ways occasionally to be so specific in how they're relating to them that can take on species characteristics, that it becomes distinctive of the species quite accidentally as just part of that full genetic kit bag that people would call an organism and a population. Oh, yeah, greetings. We'll watch later. I had a bad storm last night and have no internet. Yeah, catch us on, because that's the advantage of YouTube, that you can catch my mug afterwards. And plus, if I actually am saying something valuable, or wait until I can get the linkage up to the papers, that's another bit. You can just wait till the RJ has a chance to have the thing finalized and get all the video links in, linkages to the papers, so that anybody that does in fact want to follow up on what I'm saying, or have as a cottage industry, ooh, can I find a paper that Donald might be misrepresenting at some stage? I'm human, theoretically capable of it, but so far in all the years that I've been doing these things, that I haven't encountered anybody that has accused me of misrepresenting the content that I've been linking to, which is, of course, one of the primary characteristics of sound method, is not misrepresenting source field. You may disagree with the paper on a particular point. You can take issue, just as I lambasted Alan Fiducia and all the rest. But nonetheless, I'm not. I would be doing a disservice to my own method if I were playing fast and loose with the source material that we're dealing with. So anyway, all of this, then, the fact that ALUs go back so far in the primate lineages, in principle, designers would need to think about when these things are happening and what's the dynamic and how come they are showing up in primate lineages generally. Why would the other primates have these things in the same way that human beings are if we're specially created? But I don't think Casey Luskin or any of the gang at the Discovery Institute is ever really going to think it through that far. And remember, they never do systematics at all, cladistic or otherwise. Even the ANOPA, I think it's called, the thing that the creationists use in baraminology, which is a kind of a method that they aren't generating their own data. They're basically taking the cladistic character states that the regular scientists use. That was the case with Woodmar and others, and it's in virtually the case in the various baraminology studies. They're not coming up with this data on their own. There is no research team of creationists going out there doing meticulous character state analysis for species. No, they're just being parasites riffing off of the technical papers that they sign, and then figuring out how much they need to leave out to make it look like creation. Short interspersed nuclear element signs have been around a very long time. Yeah, indeed, that's one of the categories in the Luskin list. The ALU block is actually the signs, which are the biggest clunk of one and the largest section of papers in the Luskin list. And there are a bunch of little sidebar subcategories. What intrigues me is why things get sprinkled in one category rather than the other. This is, in some respects, is mysterious to work out, as the order in which the kinds are listed in the ARC encounter kind list. Although certainly in the case of mammals, we've already established that they basically are following evolutionary systematics in the order that they're dealing with them. Which particular papers they might be riffing off for some of these other categories, dinosaurs and the like, is another matter. It'd be really fun if someday Answers in Genesis would actually pin down their source documentation as to how they came up with their list and based on what. But don't hold your breath on that, little puppy. Okay, we are about up at half an hour. Let me put up attempt to do another screen share. And thank all of our people who have stuck by the old RJ these years with the exciting world of Patreon. And remember, shameless plug can rattle. I put the link to the Patreon, the link to all the books, and of course the link to the old Troubles in Paradise website in every single video. So anybody that does want to jump on the bandwagon and buy the books or contribute to the project through the Patreon, it's easy peasy. If you're watching the show, there will be the links to that. So there we go. Thank you very much for continuing to help in this stressful time that we are going through. We'll be seeing what happens as we slide farther in through the month of December and to see at what point some of these little bubbles start bursting. It would just gobsmack me if the Trump administration didn't manage to crash things on either AI. NVIDIA and their projects are hogging up a huge of investment values that are seemingly indicating that the economy is still kind of healthy. Then on the other hand, you've got crypto, which Trump has his own little crypto thing. They're going to try, presumably over the course of things, especially if he can get more people into the Federal Reserve, to ease the government into having bonds connected up, government bonds and the financing connected directly to these crypto companies, and particularly to Trump's one. What could go wrong in the graft department? So the robber baron era of the 1870s and 80s is small potatoes compared to what our new grifters are doing, and they're in the actual cabinet posts, which is more than can be said for some of the things that was going on back in the robber baron era. If we survive all of that, there seems everything reason to think there's going to be some really spectacular congressional hearings on all of this stuff. And have your popcorn, your Schadenfreude popcorn handy to watch some executives and the like, those that survive the crash and don't have their empires disintegrate overnight, haul ass in there. Maybe we'll be more aggressive on fines and the like than we did with the 2008 meltdown, where for all practical purposes, the banking industry got off with no criminality bits. So we'll have to see what's going on. Expecting AI to crash the electric grid on the order of the great New York blackout. That's another factor, yeah, because and crypto applies to that as well. You'd have to look in specific states and areas. There are certainly a few states that I've been hearing about where the electric grid to supply power to these specialized AI operations are really stressing the local grid system. And all you need to have is a blip, especially if you get bad regulation coverage and a persnickety bit. All we need to do is to piss off the Canadians again. They supply a huge chunk of energy for the whole Northeast of the United States. And if they suddenly pull the plug on a lot of that stuff, you could get cascading systems all over the place. And then there's Wackaloon, Texas, which isn't part of either one of the West or East power grid systems. They have their little go it alone thing. And we know that stressful situations can take place in that area. So there's teen opportunities for disaster that can be happening in this area. Just the question is what happens first? Or do we get some backlash from the Venezuelan war that seems to be brewing, or just how pushy Trump can get to try to angle for his Nobel Prize, or whether or not our adversaries abroad decide to take advantage of our discombobulation and try to do some things around the corner under the scope of the Trump administration, because their tendency to not notice things is almost limitless. Already converted 98% of my assets to actual resources away from anything that converts into non-fungible. Yes, bright, good idea. There's already issues about liquidity and the banking system in terms of the systems that deal with changing interest rates and all of that, and the way shunted around from one banking system to another. Midas Touch has been doing reporting on that area where there's a lot of just warning signs at every level that there's things that are starting to stretch everybody thin. And will there come a threshold point, some point in 2026, when, or earlier, when way too many belt tightening and messes and difficulties are happening all at the same time, and suddenly greedy profit takers, seeing the high prices on the stock market that have been inflated by all of their speculation, decide to cash in to get their money out while they can, and that cascades a mess. There's a certain degree of not quite margin buying, because that's not really a legal thing anymore, but still around the edges, there's a lot of this happening in a lot of these secondary, not quite bond markets, but the people that are infusing capital and that sort of thing. There's a lot of edges, and there's still a bunch of people that are very suspicious about how actually long-term profitable NVIDIA and the AI system will be. Not that they won't do anything, but the difficulty is with any system where you have to have it functionally perfect, or you can't tell when it's imperfect. Of what possible utility, in a practical sense, is a system where you can't be sure whether a particular piece of information, a diagnosis in medical context, or a citation in a supposed summary of a technical argument, where you can't be sure whether it's real? So you have to now use human labor to try to figure out what parts of it are accurate and what parts aren't. The most you would want to have, I think that AI would have some practical utility, is functionally like a really fast Wikipedia, where it's able to search through things and provide frameworks, but you can't rely on it as gospel. You would only use it as a springboard to make decisions, but you'd still have to ground everything in actual data field. I think to that extent, then AI is just a really fast Wikipedia. I hope when the pop happens, the sludge coming out doesn't kill us all. Well, that's the one advantage of having a decentralized governmental system. And you've got all these separate states. We're a big country. We're a huge expanse. Even in the Great Depression, the economy didn't grind to a halt. It just got really bad for an awful lot of people. And those sorts of things act as spurs historically to tremendous reform efforts. That's what happened after the 1890s depression, and that's what happened after the 1930s one. So we just want to make sure that Trump and Nutlick and all these other nincompoops, that they're saddled with it, that they can't continue to constantly blame somebody else, Democrats, leftists, Joe Biden, Obama, the sugar plum fairy. Of course, Trump is a pathological deflector of responsibility. He'll do that to his dying day. But there will come a point when it's going to be increasingly difficult to pull off the shtick of saying things are one thing when they're not. As we can see with the Marjorie Taylor Greene, in her own way, is a weird harbinger of things to come, where when the situation is getting so toxic that it's too toxic for her, and so you have all these Republicans that are increasingly jumping ship and not running for re-election or resigning early, which means special elections. So we may have some shakeups even before we get around to the 26 midterms, assuming bearing in mind that the Trumpistas will be trying to do every damn thing they can to gerrymander the system to sustain their slim majority and keep MAGA Mike, our creation, as Speaker of the House, in charge. So on that note of thrilling and delight, let me plug Rocks Were There, Volume 1, with our little advert. The Orange Miller sludge, not the disappearing money itself. Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, there's Steve Miller and a lot of these clowns, Holman in the security system, and Kristi Noem. I mean, there's just so many people that are in a race to the bottom when it comes to arrogance and stupidity and cruelty and obliviousness to data field. And let's throw in Hegseth and all of his blither blathering. Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting time, but we have to keep our powder dry, our heads above water, avoid taking on excessive debt. And of course, people in that K-shaped economy where people who have tons of money are able to still throw that around. But we know in depression economies, there's a whole bunch of things that disappear, even with some rich people around. That's why Duesenbergs have gone bye-bye. And that's going to do an interesting measure. As a sociological enterprise, I would be looking at how commercials change on television. What kind of images are people presenting? That I see a whole slew of commercials for high-end, goldy, spectacular luxury watches on television. Is that sort of thing just going to disappear in a depression economy as people have way more important concerns than all the little frizz bang stuff? Will some of these pundits like Joe Rogan and others start shrinking because their ill-gotten gains from their blathering over years, they made the mistake of maybe putting in crypto or in stock market, and poof, their money can disappear overnight. So anyway, it's going to be a really exciting time. And with people like Marketplace on NPR, this will be if we have a depression, this will be the first depression in history that modern media have been in place, that have computer analyses and all the rest, to be able to study this in a way that the people in 1929 through 1940 didn't have. So that will be an interesting little dynamic one. We'll all be able to see the reporting on it on our smartphones. La-di-da. Okay, let's put up our little advert for the rocks were there. See if I can manage the screen share without losing that bloody menu again. Come on. Okay, and then we need to get that up and get that over there. Boop. And okay, and let's get that going. The thickness of the book is not an illusion. Rocks Were There is a hefty tome, and Volume 2 will be just as jam-packed. Coup de grace to creationism. Systematic answer to the unscientific nonsense of creationism. Thorough rebuttal. The reference bibliography for Volume 1 is bigger than many a creationist book. We paid close attention to the kinds of creationist 40 reasons why evolution is bad. Then they would be listing all of these little claptrap things. Our point is that we will want to be picking up at all of those points being covered with appropriate material between the two books. And so we hit a lot of the stuff on biological topics, geological topics and stuff in Volume 1. We're hitting more of the cosmological things, stuff like helium leakage from the atmosphere and all of this stuff that still shows up on creationist lists. Although there's as we'll be pointing out in our details, there's some interesting switches as to which groups are doing what. Like CMI, for example, kind of stands out for accepting the Chicxulub impact event in a way that some of the other ones are kind of dicey about. And then, of course, there's a hilarious breakdown of the different opinions about a lot of these remnant dinosaurs and depictions of things in the Paluxy River tracks, that it sprawls all over the map, as it's where some creationists will say, oh, these are good arguments, and others are going, no, these are not good arguments. And it's hilarious to see why they pick the things they do. It's delightful. My smartphone, a lobotomy, it's only a phone now. Yes. Smartphones are handy devices, but I don't like to do certain things on them. That the screen size, I prefer to watch YouTubes and the like on my PC, because I can have multiple windows going easily, and I can see information and make commentaries on the fly and the like in a way that's really awkward with the smartphone, and you can lose track of things that way. That screen is handy for some things, and it's the advantage of being fantastically portable. I can do some miscellaneous information searches, but typically the kinds of stuff that I really am making use of, I like to do. In some cases, I would be doing it on my laptop, where I can download things easily to a flash drive, and that when I need to save PDFs and things like that. One of the reasons why I'm a little late starting on today is because I'm still catching up with the technical information that I was collecting from the week hiatus while I was over in Seattle. There were some delightful new technical papers. Remember, every single week there's new issues of Science and Nature and Science Advances and Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And so new stuff comes in that needs to be incorporated into the material. Neat little paper like on Yellowstone and the big magma plume that produces all those little volcanic calderas. That phenomenon, in counteracting the kind of uplifts that otherwise are taking place, had effects measurable over tens of millions of years on the drainage patterns of rivers, particularly relating to the Snake River and the Missouri River on either side of this plume structure. And creationists, incidentally, will be part of a little info box that'll be in the new book, have tried to kind of either ignore the Chicxulub event or fold it into, well, it's a catastrophe, and that's all taking place during the flood. The ashfall from the Yellowstone caldera in Nebraska, they're trying to think that this is all taking place when the place is underwater, or what exactly is going on here. It's absolutely hilarious. PC is a hardened multi-layer layer security. All phones leak. Yeah. So I operate off of the different modality. For here, the laptop, functionally, all I use it for is this show that we're seeing here. But it does have the advantage that it's portable. I can take it around and deal with it, and it has this little built-in camera and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes when I'm doing Zoom meetings and the like, I'm doing it on my smartphone. That's just as handy as anything, so long as my battery doesn't run down. We use various venues to handle our various things, and maybe newer technologies will come along, and I'll have more money later on in the future to be able to change the dynamics after we get past the Trump depression. But for the moment, I've got enough little magic toys that I can keep abreast of the technical material, easily do research on materials, save the data fields that I need to deal with. Oh, Lordy B, it's handy having PDFs and the ability to save full text on stuff on such a broad range. I can guarantee you that Jackson and I could never have done something on the scale of the rocks were there even 10 years ago. That the availability of material is just quantum leap ahead of what it was. And so we're taking advantage of it while we can before civilization collapses. So anyway, we're about 45 minutes down the road in there. Clove to cite falsified hypothesis is current. Oh, that is one that we'll be paying a great deal of attention to in the new book, where it's a dead giveaway when a creationist source, just like we were doing today with the Gautier 1986 cladistic study that Sarfati and Tay were offering in 2022. Why not deal with more recent information? And so they would be bringing up older works. There's quite a few cosmology examples that are going to be in the new book that will be documenting how they're riffing off of really older material and paying no attention whatsoever to the mountain of technical literature that is on these subjects that has occurred since. Some of the things are ones where geomagnetic reversals and some of these other aspects that creationists, the Theia impact event, that's another one that creationists were really slow on the uptake. I mean, this was really a hot ticket item, certainly starting from the 1970s on, and it took them 20 years to start tiptoeing into it, and not a hell of a lot of postings on it either, and they've kind of shied away from a lot of it since. So it's really interesting to see how the arc of sort of alluding to older material, CMI is particularly fond of this, to some extent Answers in Genesis, that they will be reposting older material, recycling stuff. Even Jackson, co-author, would sometimes have to look twice to realize that an article that was a 2012 posting up on the website was actually from like a 1990s article. And that provenance and working out the exact details of when things are done, it can often be rather dicey. An awful lot of online internet stuff, the most frustrating stuff are the tendency to do posts that have no dates. When was it posted? So sometimes it's like a detective job that you can put a ballpark on it. In some cases, I've had hard copies of some of these older posts, so I know for a fact that the posting was in place in like 2008 and is the same now. It hasn't changed any. So that means that I would provisionally give it a date of 2008, even though it may have been earlier. In other cases, I kind of go for the most recent material in it. So if they are alluding to stuff from 2016, regardless of what the sidebar material is, that's especially if they're riffing off of internet material, odds are that's probably when they were writing the thing. It's bad when picking cherries to pass whole orchards to keep the color you want. It's dysfunctional methodology at best. Yeah. And the other factor, of course, is the sheer laziness of it all, because I think this is one argument that everybody that's in this biz should really be calling attention to, is that there is no excuse for bloody ignorance, not in 2025. The information is too easily available. I can find the information. What the hell is keeping you from finding the information? Can't you Google search? Can't you check stuff out? It was just watching a video from dear ferocious Flint Dibble, where he's going after another guest on a Joe Rogan show, where they're claiming that there might be a UFO buried underneath a pyramid out in Egypt. And it's just a daisy chain of wishful thinking and overstatement and relying on secondary unreliable sources that they are never fact checking. I mean, it's just hilarious. And Dibble has kind of borrowed the phrase that Milo Rossi came up with, Google debunking, as the technique of where, you can search this stuff out yourself. You can find the original papers. So many of these areas are public access papers. They're obscure. They're the kind of things that you would not, they would be some obscure Eastern European journal of archaeology or something, but that doesn't mean they don't exist and you can't find them. So as just a rough heuristic, I would say that in one form or another, either directly on the journals themselves or in scientists who have co-authored the papers, who have posted these things on ResearchGate or some other context, or university courses that may be drawing on them, like the geology papers that Nick Zentner puts up for his various geology videos and courses there at Central Washington State University. That as a rough heuristic, probably you can get 80% or more of the technical material freebie, no cost. You don't have to pay a surcharge or anything for it. You can find that stuff available as PDFs that you can download. And hunt around for material. Typically hunt around for titles. In other words, the title of the article. although the weirdness of search engines are such that sometimes you would want to trim it down to kind of phrasings and things. Plus, not only might you then be pulling up access to the actual article, but follow-up material as people are referring to this and discussing it in other contexts. Slip past most of the time if all you're getting are public accounts of things, the press release, Smithsonian article on it. That's not the technical literature, that's commentaries on it. It can give you avenues to hunt, but it's not the destination. And ideally, the more you ground everything in the original primary scholarly peer-reviewed source material, the safer you will be from falling off gangplanks. Most researchers would be happy to send you a free copy. That's another factor, and I know that for a fact. When I was doing the old 2006 Talk Reason version of the discussion of the Woodmorap material, I wrote Professor Lowe at Carnegie Museum, and he was very thankful because he was the author on the papers that were being riffed on by Woodmorap, and he sent me the hard copies of them. So Journal of Reproducible Results. And that's generally speaking the case. You would find the lead author in the paper, the one that is kind of like the email person of contact, and click away. So that would be information that you would find in the abstract of any major technical paper. And yeah, odds are that they'll be perfectly happy to send you a copy of the thing, especially when you explain the context of it. So that there is no excuse whatsoever in our present circumstance to be unable to find sound information and to fact check the information that you deal with. And therefore, the failure to do that is an indication of unsound method. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So anyway, there we are. We're coming up on our full hour of show here. So everybody stay super duper safe. If you've got weather messes, there's an awful lot of big storm systems. We've been relatively lucky up here in the Pacific Northwest. In fact, my drive back from Seattle, roads were bare. Although, boy, there's potential droughts and stuff in the summer if they don't get more snow up in there's a big reservoir that one passes on I-90 going through Snoqualmie Pass. It doesn't actually provide the water base for Seattle proper, but other communities around in the region do depend on that. And boy, that reservoir is low. And so I'm hoping there gets some stuff in there. But certainly there was not mountain snow running through just the lightest of dusting. So although it was a storm system that was enough to disrupt traffic on the day before Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving proper, gone by the time I drove back this weekend. So everything flips up and down, in and out. We're very excited. Been ahead for the dry season, yeah. And people in various countries, we're in a new climate environment. So those strong La Nina, El Nino weather cycles are kind of permanent and intense and increasingly intense, and storm systems are often moving more slowly. And so not that they have more water than before, although they can be because of the warming oceans, but they travel so slowly that they just dump so much water into regions that they produce disastrous flooding. So all of that is part of the world that we're dealing with here in 2025, that young people are going to have to be working their way through for the next decades. And just how we're a resilient species, but as the grand history of life has shown, things can check out. And I would like to see civilization continue, and I would like to see us get past Trumplandia, and I would like to see us do Star Trek-y kinds of things, exploring the universe and doing the sorts of smart stuff that we as a species are perfectly capable of, and improving our social systems so that bad things aren't happening to people in a way that they seem to be happening at the moment. So particularly get a lot of snow, now it's my fault. Yeah. Well, it depends on where the snow is. In fact, there's a lot of snowstorms and stuff in the east, and things can get, because of these whiplashing jet streams, you can get really cold stuff hitting northern Florida, which can screw up the citrus crops and all the rest, plus the fact that ICE is running amok and hauling away the people who might be picking crops down there. So it's going to be very exciting as we pass through December and into January. We'll see. And apparently the Trump administration is also kind of slow on the uptake now for issuing reports on like unemployment and other stuff. And because they distort information and have to, because Trump doesn't like bad news, it's very probable that because of how they've understaffed everything and intimidated people, that there's going to be an awful lot of uncertainty, which businesses do not like. And that's yet another cascading effect that companies will be avoiding making long-term decisions precisely because they can't get reliable data. So one thing leads to another. So anyway, everybody stay super duper safe and watch out for the wooden penguins. And we will be seeing you next week with another Evolution Hour ending